James Davilla. Introduce you quickly. James Davilla is a physician practicing gastroenterology here in San Jose, a popular historian in military history with many publications on especially French aircraft and completing a 50,000-page encyclopedia of military aircraft. And so, without further ado.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. You know, it's not easy being a World War I aviation historian. Most people know three things about World War I aviation: Snoopy, the Red Baron, and thank you, Jack, for covering all those areas so I don't have to. We're going to take a completely different tack today than what you've seen in the first two talks. People have a very odd idea about World War I aircraft. This is a representation from the dastardly Muttley show, which I think shows a fairly accurate impression of what most people think about World War I bombers. It's an angular fuselage, multiple wings, multiple engines, loaded with cannons, included an isolated person sitting up in the top with a cannon. What a ridiculous notion. You got to wonder where they get these ideas. This is the Boisson E-20. And this was an experimental bomber by the Boisson firm in France for the Concours Poussin of 1916. It indeed has an angular fuselage, multiple wings, multiple engines, and is loaded with cannons, including ones in the crow's nest above the wing. Now, it's easy to lack at some of the World War I designs, but it's important to remember that it was innovation in World War I that resulted in many of the technological advances we take for granted today in military aircraft. And that's what I'm going to be talking about. We're going to start with air-to-air missiles. In 1915, the French Navy asked Le Prieur, a French naval engineer, to design a system whereby they could fire missiles from these World War I aircraft, and hopefully air-to-air targets. He took the Congreve rocket, and you probably don't know of the Congreve rocket, but you actually sing about it all the time when you say the Star-Spangled Banner and say the rockete's red glare. Those are Congreve rockets, fired by British troops. He took the basic design, which looks for all the world like a skyrocket, with a long stabilizing stick, and made three modifications for three different types of targets. First was the Z-type. This was Z for Zeppelin. If you'll notice on the front of this weapon, unfortunately my mouse isn't working, but on the front of this weapon, you'll see there's a knife, and that's designed to cut through the envelope of the Zeppelin, which are fairly thick. The charge is aluminum charge, which would be ignited by the actual rocket exhaust itself. That was believed to be enough to bring down a Zeppelin in flames. Next was the D-type. D is in Draken. Now, those are much easier targets. You don't need a knife in the nose. You don't even need a charge. So they put sand in the nose to get ballast so it would penetrate the envelope. And then the rocket exhaust itself would detonate the hydrogen gas. Finally, there was the S-type. And this was designed to bring down other aircraft. The main difference here was that the weapon chosen was a grenade with a 2-second delay, and that delay would be enough for the weapon to penetrate the airframe and then detonate. Here's how they were mounted. I mentioned the long stabilizing sticks where you stick them in the tubes between the interplaying struts, usually 4 to 5 per side. Now obviously you're launching a flammable object from an airplane made of wood and canvas, so you have to do something to protect it. So they wrapped asbestos around the struts, and in strategic locations put metal, usually aluminum, to help protect it. Launching was by electrical control system, controlled by the pilot in the cockpit. He could launch them all at once, or 2 at a time each side. Aiming? Well, this was somewhat a crude sight, but this is how it was aimed. They had a series of circles, the largest representing a target 200 meters away, the smallest 600 meters. The idea was to get your target to fill that circle and fire at it and hope you could get a hit. It was first tested in March 1916, and this is a Reese Farman 11. We don't know exact model Farman that was used initially, but it probably was one of these. And the testing was successful. They were able to fire them, and the aircraft didn't catch on fire. So now it was time for operational use, and it went into operational use only 2 months later. May 1916, the Battle of Burdock. A number of Newport escadrilles are equipped with aircraft that have rocket armament. And the initial results were extremely encouraging because what they are doing is attacking Draken balloons Now, the Drachen balloons, as any balloon in World War I, was very well defended by anti-aircraft artillery. But if you could launch your missiles outside of the range of that, you were much safer, and you could get a kill. The Germans didn't expect that, and for that reason, the initial efforts with this aircraft were extremely successful. Nunziger himself is said to have scored a number of victories at that battle. However, the Germans learned quickly, and as time went on, they modified the defenses to take account for rocket-armed aircraft. The rockets were also used in air-to-air combat, and here there was a major problem. As I showed you on the drawing, you attack a Zeppelin or Drachen from the side, but because the missiles tend to drop off, when you're attacking another aircraft, you have to attack from above and drop down. Now, you're not going to get a fighter with these missiles. You're going to get a two-seater bomber reconnaissance aircraft. Here's the problem. They all have rear gunners. So you're putting yourself in a very vulnerable position, and that didn't make these missiles very popular with the pilots. So, about a year and a half after they entered service, missile armament was dropped by the French in favor of incendiary ammunition, which was much easier to use and more effective. The British had a brief flirtation with rockets. So this is one aircraft, a Sopwith Baby, armed with the 10 missiles. They have a picture of this actually in the article. I used it from salvoing all of them off. Very impressive, but the British had a similar experience to the French. They found that the missiles were extremely inaccurate. They created a great amount of drag even after they were launched because they had tubes on the wings. They did attempt to fix some aircraft in the field with missiles, but overall it was unsuccessful, and they made far less use of it than did the French. The Germans did have some experimentation with rockets. This is the Halberstadt D2. The D2, this is, I believe, the only German aircraft that actually went to the front lines and was experimentally used to see if it would be of any value in combat. Like the British, the Germans quickly discovered it wasn't a particularly practical weapon, and so it was abandoned. So by late 1917, this entire weapon system is abandoned. However, it's not forgotten. We cut forward now to 1943. Germany is under attack by boxes of B-17s and B-24s of the 8th Air Force. These aircraft have mutual defensive fire, making it a death trap for any fighter attempting to enter. So what better way to bring them down than to stay out of the range of that fire and launch a missile? This is the BR-21 Burdock, and it is a modified shell carried inside of a tube. And this rocket is launched at the formation, and if you got lucky, you got a hit. And if you hit something, you destroy it. But better yet, if you didn't get a hit, the sight of those fighters launching missiles at you caused the pilots to break up their formation, reducing significantly their mutual defensive fire and making them a much easier target for the attacking German fighters. But there's a price to be paid for using this weapon. You can see it here on the BF-109G. Those rockets are carried in tubes that create a great deal of drag. And because the missile, like the Locale rockets, tends to drop, those tubes have to be mounted at an angle. This all creates a lot of drag. Even after you fire your missile, you have those pods on the wings, those tubes on the wings. And what the pilots found was that it really severely reduced their maneuverability. The Germans did make a brief attempt to improve this by the R-4M missile, which was carried on wooden pallets. This is an ME-262. However, overall, there was little use made of rockets in World War II. But for the sake of completeness, I'm going to show you this picture. This is a Polikarpov I-16 with RS-82 allegedly air-to-ground missiles. Now, the commander of one of the German units in combat with the Japanese in the homeland in 1939 claims his unit brought down 20 aircraft in air-to-air combat with these missiles. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether or not that's true, but the answer is no. Post-war, there is a resurgence in interest of air-to-air missiles. And this is Jonathon launching a salvo. And this is a pod from the French Dassault fighter. And you can see that the rockets are smaller. They now have some stabilizing fins that fold. And they're carried in like a pinecone structure. Major user of these missiles is the United States Air Force, because they've got a very difficult mission. They've got to defend against Russian strategic bombers coming over the poles, but they have to intercept them before they get near American cities. And they're coming over individually, making interception very difficult. First attempt to do this was the F-94, and you see the yellow panels with stars. Those are missile tubes, and those tubes would fold in and you launch the missiles. And on the wing, that white pod, that's a frangible cone over missiles. These were the first attempts to try to protect our country against Soviet bombers. An F-86 Sabre was modified, becoming the F-86D, and this has a radar, intercept radar on the nose. And the solution for drag was to create a tray that would go up and down. You could launch as many as you wanted, bring it back up. Aircraft performance would not be impeded significantly.